out by saying good morning and welcome, and thanking my colleagues. This is one of those days where, when the schedule was changed, obviously, Mr. Wahlberg, who is the vice chair of this subcommittee, and Mr. Conley, who is the ranking member of this subcommittee, adjusted their schedules to remain here. And so on behalf of myself and all those that I represent, I want to acknowledge that, and I thank you. I also want to make a welcome to all those that not only have traveled so far and are here today to testify and come and be here on this important issue, but those on a webcast that we probably had more calls about how to view this particular hearing than others that would maybe make the headlines of the Washington Post. So it is refreshing to see that so many people are wanting to get involved. The Tennessee Valley Authority, or the TVA as it's known, is a federal corporate agency of the United States, and in May of this year, the board of directors of TVA actually proposed a policy to prohibit all new floating homes on the 49 reservoirs in the 7 southeastern states. This proposed policy also required the removal of all floating homes after a 30-year sunset provision. For the hard-working homeowners in the TVA's jurisdiction of Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Kentucky, this proposed policy would be devastating. Now, I've said this before, and I will say it again, this is yet another example of the federal government getting involved without seriously evaluating the consequences placed on tax-paying families. And as we will hear in testimony today, those impacted, some of whom have lived on these reservoirs for generations, feel genuinely outraged and misled. For example, many were promised in 1978 when TVA put forth a rule that it would subsequently really never enforce for nearly 40 years, that existing houseboats would be grandfathered in. And yet here we are today. Those that are owners of the grandfathered houseboats are being told to start packing their bags. What's more, the number of floating homes that have increased over the decades, and the homeowners in the Tennessee Valley have invested tens of thousands and indeed tens of millions of dollars into new or existing floating homes. In my home state of North Carolina, hundreds of families will be forced to move from their homes, many of whom who have enjoyed those and lived there for years and years and years, if not decades. This policy would be also detrimental financially to the impact on the region, and will become nearly impossible for those families, now that we have this sunset provision, to sell their floating homes. When you look at it, not to mention the fact that it will dampen the thriving houseboat tourism communities that are in many of some of the most difficult, economically challenged areas in the Southeast. Today, we will also hear whether or not those purported improvements, the removal of the houseboats, will have on the environment. And is that accurate? And is this an infringement that's worth taking on to invade the personal liberties and freedoms to live where one and chooses? Instead of focusing on this policy, the TVA, in my opinion, should focus its energies on its critical priorities. I don't know that I've ever been more clear in my position to leadership of an agency or sub-agency, or in this case, a federal corporation, in terms of my disapproval of a particular decision than this. For example, providing electricity for businesses and customers and the local power distributors of some 9 million people in the Southeast. Instead of displacing the homeowners, perhaps TVA should focus on its current efforts to sell a nuclear plant, which by some public accounts is being sold for $36 million after investing $5 billion. $5 billion, and you're going to sell it for $36 million. Or perhaps you need to look at continuing to work on the cleanup of the Kingston plant coal ash dump that actually contaminated drinking water. of over 1 million people. So I guess my concern here today is, what is the priority? Is the priority affecting the property rights of so many people that are here and watching? Or is it what TBA was originally designed for, and that was to produce energy and to do flood control? So I'm anxious to hear some of the testimony today. I look forward to what I would say a robust discussion as we look to hopefully resolve this particular issue. And again, I thank the witnesses for their participation, and I'll recognize the ranking